Hello and welcome back to another full commander deck tech of one of my actual decks. Just a few days, the last few cards did arrive, and so I have finished my Kykar Zephyr Awakener commander deck, and now I can make a full deck rundown about this deck. And as always with my deck tech videos, I have built this deck and I have sorted all of the cards to be in different sections of how to approach the deck, and I will make a few cross references to the deck. First of all, let's start with the commander. It is Kykar Zephyr Awakener, a 4-mana 3/4 with flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose one, exile another target creature you control, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So as you can see already from that ability, it is a flicker deck, or there is a huge flicker theme in this deck, and the alternative mode is create a 1/1 Wild Spirit creature token with flying. Of course, I could have built this deck to be a Azorius control flicker infinite combo deck, but I wanted to go for a different approach. This turned out to be a token beatdown deck, and how I want to approach the game is with bringing out a few ETB value pieces and then flicker them with Kykar, and at some point I will be at the break-even point where I can also start to make spirits with Kykar, which I will use to beat down my opponents with. And yeah, this is the face commander. I would say we just jump right into all of the cards in this deck and start with it. First of all, I want to mention Kykar is, in my opinion, extremely powerful because it cares about when you cast a non-creature spell. So as soon as you cast a spell, you will get the Kykar trigger and you can decide to exile a creature card or to make a spirit. The first section is sadly just 2 cards, which I couldn't fit into any section, but yeah, let's just get it over with those cards. First card is Tutors Welcome, 3-mana enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is relevant for all of the tokens that you create, as they will draw you a card. It is limited to once each turn, but due to the fact that we are also an Azorius control deck, we react a lot in our opponent's turns. We will either make spirits, we will exile our creatures. Our creatures, a lot of them have mana value 3 or less, so we will get another trigger and we will draw a card. When it comes to deck building, I personally think it is very important to have something against, mostly every matchup that you can play against, which is why I play Ghost Vacuum. And worth mentioning, even though it isn't a sorcery in instant, it is simply a non-creature spell, so even casting Ghost Vacuum will trigger Kykar, which is definitely worth mentioning. Just as Tutors Welcome, just every non-creature spell triggers Kykar. It's a 1-mana artifact, you can tap it to exile target card from a graveyard, and this is in this deck simply for the matchup against against any reanimator or graveyard strategies. And it's 6 mana, tap it and sacrifice it and put each creature card exile with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter, and each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. The activated ability of sacrificing it just won me a game a few days back because I exiled a Gisela from one of my opponent's graveyards, I had a few tokens on board, and in my turn I cracked it, had a Gisela on board, and I was able to swing for the win. The first section that I will feature, which we now officially enter, is the Wincons section. How does this deck win? The most powerful Wincon in this deck is Divine Visitation, a 5-mana enchantment, and if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 White Angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead, which means you cast a non-creature spell, a counterspell or anything, and that triggers Kykar. You can choose to make a spirit, and instead you will make a 4/4 White Angel with flying and vigilance, which will be your most powerful beatdown creatures in this deck. Not only very powerful in Standard, but also in Commander is Caretaker's Talent, a 3-mana enchantment class, and on the first level you get to draw a card whenever a creature token or whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control. Triggers only once each turn. Second stage, you get to create a token copy of a token you control. And the third chapter is another Anthem. Creature tokens you control get +2/+2, which is also one of my Wincons. We got Inspiring Leader, a 3-mana background enchantment. Commander creatures you own have creature tokens you control get +2/+2. So another Anthem for all of my tokens. We play Intangible Virtue, a 2-mana enchantment. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance, which is really nice as all of those spirits do fly, and having a 2/2 flying vigilance army is always a nice to have, and yep, it's quite a powerful card. I really like it. This was the Wincon section in this deck, and we continue with additional flicker. I wanted to not play too many additional flicker spells simply because Kykar is my flicker engine. The rest should happen by firing off cantrips or control spells or interaction spells. but there are still a few very powerful flicker spells that are worth playing. For example, Cloud Shift, a 1-mana instant, exile target creature you control, return it to the battlefield under your control. Especially all of those cheap flicker spells also act as protection spells for Kykar herself, simply because Kykar can only flicker other creatures you control. So if my opponent tries to remove Kykar and I want to keep her around, I will just Cloud Shift Kykar, for example, trigger Kykar, and flicker one of my other creatures, which is... I have to invest a flicker spell to protect Kykar, but due to the flicker and the maybe a leave the battlefield trigger or another ETB trigger, I would at least go even again when it comes to cards in hand or something. So, Cloud Shift. We play Essence Flux, 1-mana instant, exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's a spirit, put a 1/1 counter on it. Same as Cloud Shift, just a little bit better. Ephemerate, same thing, but it also has Rebound, which is extremely powerful because if you cast it in your upkeep, it's still a cast. So in your upkeep, you will get another Kykar trigger, another Flicker trigger. Very, very powerful. It's simple as that. Flicker of Fate, a 2-mana instant. I do play this one because you can flicker enchantments, so it matters as a protection spell for all of our Anthem enchantments. And this is why I play Flicker of Fate. Really, really powerful. I like this card. Momentary Blink, a 2-mana instant. You can flicker a creature you control, and the reason why I play this flicker spell is because it has flashback, so it can be a helpful tool from your graveyard. And yep, that's actually it. It's a very versatile spell, especially if you're in a mill setup. People can mill this card of yours and it ends up in your graveyard, but you still have advantage from your grave. We do play Getaway Glimmer, a 1-mana instant with Spree. First mode, exile target non-token creature, so this can also be for your opponent's creatures, with what might be relevant, and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And the +2 mod is destroy target creature if no other creature has greater power. It's a very unique line and it doesn't happen that often, especially with the exile thing. You are one cheaper, you can delay their win, and so on and so on. The second one, yeah, kind of tough to find a spot for that. This was the section about my additional flicker spells, and now we come to Flicker Advantage. We play Helpful Hunter, a 2-mana 1/1, and when it enters, draw a card. I do think that I don't have to explain much why I play this card. It simply replaces itself with Kykar. You can draw additional cards, this is the reason why we play it. Just as Wall of Omens, 2-mana 0/4 with Defender. On ETB, draw another card, and it's a great blocker. Just as Spirited Companion, 2-mana 1/1, on ETB, draw a card. We play Muldrifter. It is a flicker deck, so we have to play Muldrifter. A 5-mana 2/2 with flying, on ETB, draw 2 cards, and you can evoke it. Remember that on ETB you get 2 triggers, the draw 2 cards and the evoke trigger. Let the draw 2 cards resolve first, after that hold priority. Fire off a cantrip or a removal spell, triggering Kykar, flicker the Muldrifter, and it will come back in your end step, draw you another 2 cards, and it will stick around. Really powerful. Dowerport Mage, I love this card in this deck because for 2 mana you get a 1/3, and whenever one of our creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card, and for 2 mana and tapping it, return another target creature card you control to its owner's hand. The activated ability can be used to protect Kykar in a certain spot if you don't have any cantrips available or something. Happens rarely, but it happens. And the additional card draw trigger is great because this deck doesn't flicker creatures several at once. It's always a single instance, so you can draw a bunch of cards. Let's say you want to Cloud Shift one of your creatures, trigger Kykar, you exile the first creature, trigger Dowerport Mage, draw a card, then your Cloud Shift resolve, trigger Dowerport Mage, you draw another card. This can draw you a lot of cards. Because of a lot of low power creatures, I do play Enduring Innocence, a 3-mana 2/1 with lifelink, and whenever one of my creatures you control with power 2 or less enters, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, and when it dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. It's so strong. It's really, really good because we have a lot of low power creatures. We can make spirits that are below the 2 power mark, and you also draw a bunch of cards with this card. And it's a great blocker. I like to block with it early on simply to be able to get it back as an enchantment, so it's protected from Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares. Really good card. Of course, we play an Aether Channeler, 3-mana 2/1. When it enters, choose 1. Make a bird token, which can trigger a lot of synergies. You can return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And remember, it's non-land permanent. You can remove everything with that, except lands. And you can draw a card, so another value piece that is worth flickering that also provides a lot of flexibility. Lowering of the Third Path, a 3-mana 2/1 with Vigilance. On ETB, you destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. You can tap her and you and target opponent each draw a card, which is at some point really helpful because you need to make sure to hit your land drops with this deck, simply to not fall behind. It's hard to ramp naturally in this deck. I don't like playing too many mana rocks, but yeah, this activated ability came in handy quite a few times, and yeah, we take it. We play Skyclave Apparition, a 3-mana 2/2. And on ETB, you exile up to one target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with mana value 4 or less. And when it leaves, the exiled card's owner creates an XX blue illusion creature token, where X is the mana value of the exiled card, which can be really helpful to take care of certain cards like Smothering Tithe, Heuristic Study, and so on and so on. And yeah, great card, great removal spell. Yeah, we come to the loop creatures. This deck can work towards a soft or a hard lock with certain cards, and Archaeomancer is definitely part of that, because for 4 mana, you get a 1/2, and on ETB you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This one enters, you get your counterspell back. An opponent tries to cast a big spell, you cast your counterspell, trigger Kykar, flicker Archaeomancer, end step it comes back, and you get your counterspell back. It takes a few turns until you get your soft to a hard lock, simply because you need to have as much mana available to always repeat this loop in your opponent's turns, and also generate enough card advantage or value by itself to be able to also win at some point. It doesn't help if you only lock your opponents down, you also need to win. But if you can go through like 2 to 3 turn cycles, you should be at your hard lock position, and Archaeomancer is definitely a huge part of this lock. Great card. We play Besa, the Bounding Spring, a 4 mana 4/5, which is already a great stat line and probably one of our most powerful creature in this deck. And on ETB, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you get a treasure, you gain more life. If an opponent has more life, you get 2 1/1 blue fish creature tokens. If an opponent controls more creatures than you, and you draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. A very powerful flicker target, because in most cases you at least get one of the things out of it, which is already great. And in addition to that, it is, always keep in mind, if you are counting for the additional card draw, always keep in mind, while you have Besa in hand, Besa will be on the battlefield, or you will cast it and it will hit the battlefield, so always calculate -1 if you have Besa in hand to cast her. Another token generator in this deck is Genko, Future Shaper, a 4 mana 2/5, and whenever another non-token permanent you control leaves the battlefield, it's not only creatures, it's non-token permanents. Choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, and you get to make a 2/2 white fox with Vigilance, a 1/2 blue moonfolk with Flying, and a 1/1 black-red with Lifelink. Now just give me a second, I do have those tokens here. It is worth mentioning, so you can make your spirits with Kykar. Oh, where's my other spirit? You can make your spirits with Kykar, you can make your moonfolk, you can make your foxes, you can make your rats, you can, yeah, another fox, and your fish, and most importantly, your angels. This is probably my favorite angel token that exists, and all of the other ones are made by a friend of mine. They look really, really cool and give this deck a really, really cool flavor. I do like them a lot. Yes, that's Genku, Future Shaper. And for 5 mana, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. This is a very heavy mana investment, but it can be a very nice Anthem effect. Haven't used it yet, but it can help. Preston the Vanisher. Of course, this card had to be in this deck, a 4 mana 2/5, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't cast, so if you flicker it, for example, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 0/1 white illusion. And for 2 mana and sacrificing 5 illusions, exile target non-land permanent, which can be great removal. But if Preston sticks around and you get to flicker a few value pieces of yours, you will generate simply so much value that you will run away with the game. Of course, we play a Displacer Kitten, a 4 mana 2/2, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return a card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Remember that this ability can also target Displacer Kitten itself, so it is very hard to get rid of this thing, and this is also a huge advantage piece, as you can, from then on, if Displacer Kitten is on the battlefield, you can start making tokens with Kykar, and this will be your main flicker engine. We play Savager of Secrets, 5 mana 2/2. It is the more expensive version of the Archaeomancer, and on ETB you get the same effect as the Archaeomancer. We could also play the Scholar for 7 mana, but in my opinion, it costs too much. And the Salvager is, in my opinion, a great alternative to Archaeomancer. If he gets removed at some point, I like to have a backup. From our whole flicker advantage, we continue with the next section, which is cheap cantrips. So we play Opt, a 1 mana instant, scry 1, draw a card, trigger Kykar. We play Consider, 1 mana instant, surveil 1, draw a card, trigger Kykar. We play Gig's Probe, for 1 blue Phyrexian mana, a sorcery, look at target player's hand, draw a card, trigger Kykar. We play Impulse, a 2 mana instant, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, trigger Kykar. My favorite blue spell and one of my signature cards in this deck, because So far, you have seen probably a lot of cards that are very commonly played in Flicker decks, but this one is my unique idea in my opinion. I haven't seen it in any other list yet. It's Meeting of Minds, a 4-mana instant with Convoke and draw 2 cards. This is pretty often a free spell, if you want to say it like that, if I have enough tokens on the battlefield. Kykar is a blue creature, other cards are blue creatures, and I make white spirit creature tokens. I can tap my creatures. For example, I had scenarios where I was tapped out, and my opponents thought, okay, now we can remove stuff of him. Let's just target Displacer Kitten, for example. And I tapped Displacer Kitten, a few spirits, I did cast Meeting of Minds, trigger Displacer Kitten, it flickered itself, and it comes back untapped. So you convoke a creature card, and you flicker it, and it comes back untapped, so it can be reused for convoke spells. And for example, I did that a lot with when I was building the soft lock or the hard lock with Archaeomancer. You get your Meeting of Minds back, you get another free spell, you have your Kykar, you can make spirits. At some points, you are at a point. I had turn cycles where I was able to fire this one off like 8 times until it was my next turn. It was just very, very powerful. Guys, consider Meeting of Minds, depending on if it fits in your deck. It's a really powerful card, and it's my favorite blue card. I love this card. Trigger Kykar. We play Dig Through Time, 8-mana instant with Delve. There aren't too many spells in this deck that can be reused, of course, with Archaeomancer or the Momentary Blink, but this is so much advantage. You look at the top 7, and you put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom. And for 2 blue, you can fire this one off. Just get rid of a few cards that you don't need or need to recycle with Archaeomancer or the, how was this guy called again? The Salvager of Secrets, yeah. And cast this one for 2 mana, trigger Kykar. These were the cantrips, not too many, not too much card advantage on instant and sorcery spells here. But now we continue with even more non-creature spells that can trigger Kykar. Let's continue with our counterspell section. We play an Offer You Can't Refuse. 1-mana instant, counter target non-creature spell, and its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. Trigger Kykar. Strict Serenade. 1-mana instant, counter target artifact, creature, or planeswalker spell. Its controller creates a 2/2 bluebird creature token with flying. Can also trigger Kykar. You see, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, I have said this already in other deck tech videos of mine. I remember Gwenna, for example, or with the Silverback Elder. Cast triggers are extremely powerful if your table cares a lot about, let's say playing correctly, if you really pass prior on stuff, or if you really look out for priors, because you cast something, if it hits the battlefield, you still have prior after that. Your opponents can't remove Kykar, for example, and they have to wait for your next move to do something, and if they want to interact with it, you still can fire off a counterspell, trigger Kykar. Its cast triggers are extremely powerful in this game. We play Swansong, a 1-mana instant, counter-target enchantment, instant sorcery spell. Its controller makes a 2/2 bluebird. Arcane Denial, 2-mana instant, counter-target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. It's a May ability, remember that, but you will most likely always draw the cards if you are the opponent, and you, as the owner of Arcane Denial, must draw. Trigger Kykar. We play Dovin's Veto, a 2-mana instant. This spell can't be countered in counter-target non-creature spell. Mana Leak, another great counterspell in my opinion, a 2-mana instant, counter-target spell unless its controller pays 3 mana. Another unique card that I haven't seen in many lists is Unsubstantiate. There we go. A 2-mana instant, return target spell or creature to its owner's hand, which is great in my opinion because you can bounce a creature, and I had scenarios where my opponents, everybody played a delightful halfling, and I was like, okay, I can still bounce your spell, you're like 8-mana creature, I can simply bounce it, and I can delay your powerful turn. We continue with the original counterspell, 2-mana instant, counter-target spell, also triggers Kykar, and I run Fierce Guardianship, a 3-mana instant. It's a free spell if you control your commander, which you always want to do, and counter-target non-creature spell. And as an additional protection spell, I also play Flawless Maneuver. If I don't have an answer for a Blasphemous Act, for example, 3-mana instant, creatures you control gain indestructible, and it's a free spell if you control your commander. From counterspells and protection, we continue with interaction. We play a bunch of removal spells, and if we have our engine on board, like Kykar, and a valuable piece that we want to flicker, we are well set up to really embrace the role of a control deck. We play Rapid Hybridization, 1-mana instant, destroy target creature. Its controller makes a 3/3 green frog lizard. Path to Exile. I do start to dislike this card more and more, but it's a very powerful exile removal spell. Still, I don't like giving my opponent another land, because for 1 mana, your exile target creature, its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Cards that I really like to play in this deck are bounce spells, because it delays what our opponent wants to do and you get a bunch of free info, and a lot of opponents tend to do the same play over and over again. So it's not, you get so much information and possibilities about knowing what your opponent is about to do next turn, which is why I do like play, it's the German version, but it's Fading Hope. It's a 1 mana instant, and you bounce a creature to its owner's hand, and if its mana value was 3 or less, you get to scry 1, really flexible and powerful spell. Into the Floodmoor, a 1 mana instant, you can gift a tapped fish, you can return a creature to its owner's hand an opponent controls, or if the gift was promised, you can bounce a non-land permanent. We can continue with Swords to Plowshares, a 1 mana instant, exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. We play Pongify, a 1 mana instant, destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated, and its controller creates a free green ape creature token. More exile removal is, for example, Resculpt, a 2 mana instant, exile target artifact. Remember, it doesn't only exile creatures, it also goes for artifacts, if you're playing against the One Ring, for example. And its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. We play Reality Shift, a 2 mana instant, exile target creature, its controller manifests the top card of the library. And for removal against enchantments and artifacts, we play Heliod's Intervention, a 2 mana instant with X, and choose 1, destroy X artifacts and/or enchantments, or target player gains twice X life. Snap, basically a free spell if it resolves, a 2 mana instant, return target creature to its owner's hand, and you untap up to 2 lands. Everything, it always triggers Kykar, it's so good. We play, I think it's called Snapback in English, a 2 mana instant, and you can cast a spell for free if you exile a blue card from your hand, and you return a creature to its owner's hand. But it also can be a free spell and can surprise your opponents out of nowhere, and it also triggers Kykar, who would have guessed. We play Run Away Together, a 2 mana instant, choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players, return those creatures to their owner's hand, trigger Kykar, and you can get off 1 creature of an opponent and of another creature of a different opponent. Really good delay spell in my opinion. Just as with Meeting of Minds, I have added one of my personal ideas, and I haven't seen this card in different lists, is Wicked Slumber, a 4 mana instant with Convoke, and you tap up to 2 target creatures, you put a stun counter on either of them, and then you put a stun counter on either of them, which means you can tap one of your opponent's creatures or 2 opponent creatures, and you can either put 1 on each, or you can place 2 on 1. And again, it's a Convoke spell. So you tap your creature to convoke it, trigger Kykar, you flicker a certain creature, it comes back untapped. So you reduce the effective costs of the Convoke by 1 if you flicker something with it. I think Wicked Slumber and Meeting of Minds were ideas of mine that I've added into this deck, and they turned out to be so powerful, as free spells are so important in this deck, because I limited this deck probably by not playing too many mana rocks, and I do have to play with, especially in the early game, with limited resources, and doing that with being able to convoke spells and firing off free spells at some point gave me way more security by approaching my game plan and simply being able to keep up with the tempo that, for example, green decks have in this economy of Magic the Gathering. This was my interaction section, and now we continue with Tutors. I play Enlightened Tutor, a 1 mana instant, search a library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, and put that card on top. This can find all of my Wincons, my Divine Visitation, Inspiring Leader, and so on, but it can also find Soaring. It can find Solemn Simulacrum, cards that are extremely valuable in this deck simply to accelerate my mana base. Who would have guessed? We play Spellseeker, a great flicker target, a 3 mana 1/1, and on ETB you search a library for an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 2 or less, reveal it and put it into your hand. This can find your counterspell, your interaction spell, a few card advantage spells, everything you need, and you can flicker it with Kykar. If this one sticks around, you will have a bunch of control elements in this deck. You might have asked yourself why I'm not playing these creatures that are a little bit more expensive than, I believe, the Salvager of Secrets. There's also this 5 mana version that is a free with Prowess. And I do play a lot of these creatures in this deck also for their toughness line, because we play Recruiter of the Guard, a 3 mana 1/1, and on ETB you search a library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it and put it into your hand. There is also the 3 mana version, the 5 mana version with Prowess and a free, but I cannot tutor it. So this is why I stick with Salvager over this free version, because Recruiter can find it. Recruiter finds a lot of creatures in this deck, not every creature, but a lot of creatures, which is why I play Recruiter of the Guard and certain versions of cards that might be a little bit worse from their stat line, but I can find them with Recruiter of the Guard. These were the tutors that I play. I don't play Mystical Tutor. It didn't feel right. I proxied it and I played a few games with it. Of course, it can find my Fierce Guardianship or my Meeting of Minds, but in the end, I did cut it. And I don't feel too bad about it because I also don't want to play too many tutors. In this deck, I play 3. And of course, yeah, I know I can flicker these 2 and I can recycle Enlightened Tutor. And I think that's enough. I didn't mind cutting Mystical Tutor. It doesn't always have to be a ton of tutors. That's fine for me. 3 is enough and I can recycle them. That's fine. That's fine. I didn't want to play too many. Let's continue with ramp. We play Soaring, because we do. Arcane Signet is a good mana rock. Knight of the White Orchid, a great flicker target 2 mana 2/2 with first strike. And on ETB, if an opponent controls more lands, you may search your library for Plains card, put it onto the battlefield untapped. Always keep that in mind. And it can find my Mystical Archive, my Hallowed Fountain, my Mystic Sanctuary. Not my Mystic Sanctuary, sorry about that, but yeah, it finds a lot of cards. And Solemn Simulacrum, 4 mana 2/2, which can also be found with Recruiter of the Guard or with Enlightened Tutor, 4 mana 2/2 on ETB, find a basic land, tap to the battlefield, when it dies, you draw a card. And these were all of the non-land cards that are playing Kykar. And this is the whole non-land deck. And now we continue with the land base. Of course, we play Otawara Soaring City, a legendary land that makes blue, and for 4 mana you can channel it to return target artifact, creature, or enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. It costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control, just as Aiganjo, the legendary land for white and for 3 mana, and discarding it, you deal 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and it's also discounted for your legendaries. Witch Enchanter, a 4 mana 2/2, on ETB you destroy target artifact or enchantment, and its backside is a bold land for 3 life. Sink into Stupor, a 3 mana instant, return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to his owner's hand. Backside is another bold land, but it also triggers Kykar if I cast it. Mystic Sanctuary, a land and an island. If it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands, and when it enters, you may put a instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. As I've said earlier, I do like to be able to answer different things, and I do have the Ghost Vacuum for the graveyard matchup, but Scavenger Grounds, a 1 mana, not a 1 mana, but a desert that makes a colorless mana, and for 2 mana, tapping it and sacrificing a desert, so you can sacrifice itself, but you could also sacrifice other deserts to exile all graveyards. We play Demolition Field, a land that can destroy non-basic lands for 2 mana, tapping it and sacrificing it, and yourself and your opponent that you destroyed the non-basic land of both get to find a basic land untapped onto the battlefield, because Glacial Chasm is a card, and I keep seeing it over and over again. Reliquary Tower, because if we flicker Muldrifter over and over again, we will have a bunch of cards in hand, or other card draw engines, but Muldrifter is the card that is worth mentioning most. We play Command Tower, of course, Floodfarm, Verge, Sea of Clouds, Flooded Strand, our fetch land that can find Hallowed Fountain, Mystical Archive, the Survey land, and we got the Glacial Fortress. I could play a few more lands that make both colors. For example, there is, I believe it's called Seagate, this filter land that makes it colorless, and you can pay hybrid into it, and you can make any combination of Azorius. Might be worth doing. And then we play a bunch of planes. I do believe it's 9 planes or something. And then islands. We play islands. And yeah, that's actually my Kykar deck. Cards that I am currently considering and that I will still test are, for example, Felia, Exaberrant Shepherd, the 2 mana 2/2 dog that can be flashed in, and on attack you can exile a non-land permanent simply to have more control elements. And yeah, can also flicker your own creatures. Then I am also considering to test the Gear Hulk that just came out with Ether Drift, a 5 mana double strike, prowess, and on ETB for each opponent you return up to 1 target non-land permanent to... Oh no, I think you put it into their library. It's a 2/5 and it seems really powerful. It's a 5 mana card, but it would definitely be a card if it stays unanswered or if I have 3 spells in hand to flicker it. This can definitely turn the game around. I would probably cut a few of my, or one of my other, not Wincons, but heavy card advantage pieces. I do want to stick with Preston, and I do like Genku simply because I have great tokens for him. But Genku seems like a card, if I wouldn't have these tokens, I might consider cutting him, because I do have Kykar to make tokens, and 4 mana is a heavy investment. He did put in a lot of work in a few games, but if it comes to the Gear Hulk, it might be worth cutting Genku. And yeah, Felia and the Riptide Gear Hulk are definitely cards that I am currently taking a look at. that I want to test, that I want to play in this deck. It turned out to be an Azorius Flicker control deck, and I do win with beatdown over cards that create tokens or make my angels bigger, like these here. And I do really enjoy it. I do understand that in a lot of games recently, my opponents simply agreed to scoop because they entered the soft lock that I could do, that I can do. And they said, okay, Alex is attacking us for, I don't know, 18 every turn. He's taking players out one by one, and the turn cycle gets shorter because you always want to take out one of your opponents and then continue with the next one, simply to not having to spread your available mana over 3 opponents. You want to go 2, 1, and then you're down for them. They often agree to scoop. That's sad, but I do get it simply because they saw, and I'm also always very public about what I take back. I also play with cards constantly revealed because I'm a fan of public knowledge and stuff. If stuff like that happens, if I flicker my Chaos and I get my counterspell back and my opponents start to consider, okay, what could we do? I'm always transparent about, hey guys, listen, what you know is I have my counterspell, I took that back. A few turns earlier, I took back my swords, for example. I think that's very important, and at some point they discuss a little bit and then they agree to scoop. Not how I want to win, but this is how this deck wins. I win with token beatdown at some point, but it's also a heavy control deck, and it plays around making tokens and at some point taking over. It's an Azorius control flicker deck. What can I say? It's a great deck. I have entered this playstyle, and you know from my other deck tags that I have a huge variety of decks that I can play. I have my mono green deck, I have my whiter combo deck, I have my K&K reanimator deck, and now I have an Azorius control flicker deck. And I'm well set up now, and I do understand why people scoop against this deck at some point if I am able to go for my soft lock. But I'm always very happy if they let me build my angel army and let me swing for the win. I've had games where we played like 2 to 3 turn cycles through this hard lock, and I had an army of like 22 4/4 angels, and then I anthemed them up with Inspiring Leader, and I swinged for like, I don't know how much damage, like 132 for example. It was great, and I'm happy that my friends played that out with me, but I do also understand if people start to discuss and agree to scoop, because you can kind of look forward to it, especially if you're transparent about what you just took back with your Chaomancer or with your Salvager. So try to have a good attitude when playing a control deck, in my opinion, because yeah, we all know it's Azorius control, and yeah, still I think it should be more transparent and approach it like this. I do like limiting myself. For example, I don't play board wipes in this deck. I could play a Wrath of God, I could play Farewell, but what I do prefer is I prefer to use all of my removal and interaction spells just by having knowledge and asking myself, who's currently the problem? Who do I need to handle? I don't want to fire off a 4-mana board wipe if I could just place a very well 1-mana single targeted removal at the current problem at the table and have 3 mana available to still progress with my own game plan. I don't like playing board wipes, like symmetrical board wipes. Of course we play Ruinous Ultimatum and other decks or stuff like that, but they are asymmetrical. And yeah, I am getting into a whole different topic. This is my Kykar Azorius Flicker control deck. I do like playing this deck a lot, and I hope that you enjoyed this deck tech. And then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.